Ladies and gentlemen, and every gender in between, welcome to Gender Revolution, the YouTube channel dedicated to the normalisation of transgender in contemporary Western society. I am Julie Miller, a transgender educator and speaker. I specialise in researching and analysing the latest science of gender and converting it into short, concise, easy to understand videos for non-transgender people to learn about the wonderful world of transgender. In the first video in this series, it was discussed that the word transgender was designed in the late 20th century to more accurately describe people whose inner feelings about their gender did not match the gender that had been assigned to them at birth, and whose desire is to present their gender in a way that current society struggles to accept. In this video, we're going to examine the building blocks of sex and gender to further understand transgender and the negative feelings that transgender people experience, generalized in the phrase gender dysphoria. The reference material I've used is a book called The Psychobiology of Transsexualism and Transgenderism by Professor Thomas Bevan, which is available on Amazon. In the 20th century, it became understood by psychologists, doctors and scientists that there are three fundamental aspects to human sex and gender, and these are, firstly, sex. This is a physical state of being relating to a person's primary sexual organs: penis, vagina, womb, prostate, and described by the words male or female. Secondly, there is gender. Now, this is a mental state of being. It is a behaviour. It is how a person feels, thinks and acts, either masculine or feminine, or any variation of these two binaries, and therefore how they want to present themselves to society so that they are comfortable that their feelings are being correctly expressed. It is described by the words boy, girl, man, woman, and many, many more gender categories. And thirdly, there is sexual orientation. Now, this is how a person is sexually attracted to other people. For example, heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, trisexual, asexual, pansexual. These three fundamentals have been understood and documented by the scientific community for many decades. For example, the World Health Organization and the American Psychological Association, to name just two significant organizations, refer to these three categories, but sadly the general population, the ordinary person on the street, in the pub, in the cafe, have not received the appropriate education. And many people confuse the first two. They treat gender and sex as one and the same thing. Unfortunately, within the scientific community, there's uncertainty on how these three variables relate to each other. However, there is general consensus that just because a person is born into a male body does not necessarily mean they are a man, and vice versa for a person born into a female body. The American Psychological Association, it describes sex, quote, as assigned at birth, refers to one's biological status as either male or female. But gender refers to, again quote, the socially constructed roles, behaviours, activities and attributes that a given society considers appropriate for boys and men or girls and women. The World Health Organization similarly identifies gender, again in quotes, socially constructed characteristics of women and men, such as norms, roles and relationships of and between groups of women and men. The terms man and woman are social constructs. They are whatever the prevailing society wants them to be. After all, fundamentally, they're just words. They're formed from vowels and consonants taken from an alphabet. And the alphabet has only been around for a few thousand years, but human beings have existed an awful lot longer. So the word man or woman could not have existed before the alphabet was invented. Both these words suggest that only binary genders exist in human life, but various cultures around the world have differing concepts of gender. Some have up to 5 different genders. Not only does this anthropological evidence put into question the binary gender system, but the most recent scientific analysis and research proves conclusively that the binary gender system is just a social construct, and that gender is in fact an infinite spectrum. Just because we haven't developed words for these gender categories does not mean to say that they do not exist. Indeed, man and woman, like other words, can change their meaning over time. Once the word mother just represented the person who had given birth to a child, but now it can also represent someone who didn't give birth to the child but instead adopted it at birth. The word gay used to mean someone who was happy, but now, just as well as someone who's happy, it also refers to someone of same-sex orientation. And the word tweet, well, that used to be a sound that a bird made. The fact that gender is a behaviour means that it is defined by a person's mind rather than sexual organs. It is a state of mind or a state of being, and like all states of being, it is a spectrum. By comparison, other states of being are being tall or short, left-handed or right-handed, pretty, not so pretty, musically gifted, athletically gifted. All of these are spectrums. The world does not simply consist of tall people and short people, but an infinite number of heights in between. How can we measure the size of the gender spectrum? Well, like the light spectrum, we can't, because it does not have physical size, it does not have proportionality or dimensionality. But what is important about it, it has 2 ends, called binaries, one being the extent of masculinity and the other femininity. And the amorphous space between the 2 binaries, the logic is very clear here, we can describe as non-binary. At the extreme masculine end of the spectrum are people we can relate to as very masculine. Let's look at Arnie Schwarzenegger, a Hollywood actor, or Sylvester Stallone. And at the other end are very feminine people, Marilyn Monroe or Cameron Diaz. Unfortunately, in modern Western society, this spectrum has been divided up into bandwidths of social acceptability, with the gender described as woman occupying a significant bandwidth, almost the whole of the spectrum. So if that is the size of the spectrum, women occupy most of it. But men have only been able to occupy a small bandwidth, this little bit here at the very end. Women have been allowed to venture into masculine territory, and they are defined as, for example, tomboys, but it has not been acceptable for men to adopt similar feminine genders, for example, T-girl. In practice, this means a woman has been able to dress very femininely, for example, wearing floral dresses, high heels, lipstick, makeup. But the same woman can also wear checked jeans, heavy boots, a checked shirt, play rugby, have heavy tattoos, drink a pint of beer. Now, whilst a man can present himself in the latter presentation, he can drink the beer, have tattoos, play the rugby, for him to wear a floral dress, high heels, lipstick and makeup, this has not been acceptable in our 20th, 21st century society. Those people whose preferred gender presentation or expression does not fit into these arbitrary bandwidths have had to either hide their preferred gender from society, and we describe them as being in the closet, or present themselves to society and face the prospect of ridicule, mental and physical abuse, victimization and ostracization. And the stress and anxiety and other negative feelings associated with living in such an unwelcoming society is called gender dysphoria, which simply means unhappiness. It's a Greek word. Gender dysphoria affects people in different ways. For some, it is just a mild and irritating discomfort that they can tolerate. They may choose to stay in the closet all the time, or just present their preferred gender on a part-time basis, at home, or within a select and safe group of friends. But for others, the feeling is powerful. It's all-consuming, it's persistent, it's insistent, and it's consistent. And if they cannot present themselves on a full-time basis in their preferred gender, it can lead to depression, despair, and for many, suicide. And indeed, 40% of people suffering from gender dysphoria attempt suicide, and many succeed. The options that people have available to transition away from the bothersome gender that is causing so much anxiety can be represented in this diagram called transition options. They can make just social changes to their presentation, like wearing makeup, a wig, clothes that make them feel more comfortable, or they can go one step further and make physical changes, some irreversible, like taking hormones or having a variety of different surgical interventions. They can have laser hair removal. Finally, they can make legal changes, like changing their name by deed poll and being able to use different pronouns. And ultimately, they can gain a gender recognition certificate, which enables them to change their gender on their birth certificates. And each of these choices can be mixed and matched. They can be full or partial, whatever that person decides in order to feel comfortable. My name is Julie Miller, I am transgender, and thank you for watching this video.